kiss for you.
If you're looking to answer the question in the title, which is Siri something that's worth considering and usable in 2024? My response would be no. Again, this is out of context. This is a series where I kind of look at different products and features and things from the context of sort of someone that may be being introduced to it for the first time. And as in 2024, if you're introduced to Siri or voice assistants in general, I would generally say that these are not things that you would be using at a very consistent basis. And I anecdotally have a couple examples of that. You know, my grandmother wasn't super into these voice assistants. We got her an Alexa, and she uses that to play music and set timers and, you know, recite recipes and that kind of thing. But overall, in terms of the actual usefulness of the assistant for using Siri or Google Assistant or anything like that, she doesn't use it. And so generally speaking, I think, well, smart speakers and things like that end up being useful because they're, you know, a music player or a way to recite stuff. The actual voice assistant part of it really isn't being used. And you can see that even with Google Assistant, but especially Siri. As Siri can get things wrong, it can just either make up info as it gets more attached to the AI stuff. Like a lot of the time you'll ask Siri something and it will just pull up the website or here's what I found on the web for this thing. And that's not really useful to you because then you have to take your eyes off whatever you're doing in order to answer it, right? It's not that useful as an assistant, a hands-free assistant, basically. You still have to use your hands and still kind of interact with it. Now, that obviously is potentially going to change with the Apple Intelligence stuff. Apple just had their event yesterday as recording this, and they talked a lot about it. A lot of people glossed over a lot of these factors, and I could see why. If you are not writing down every single thing that happened in the event, like I was, you're going to miss some features that may or may not be pretty interesting. So, to me, there's a couple of features that I think really stand out about the Apple Intelligence that go beyond the standard stuff. So real quick, Apple Intelligence is this new AI thing they're using with their new iPhones. iPhone 15s and 16s, I believe, are going to get this. And it's basically just, again, the standard AI suite of features, as well as some newer things kind of integrated into Siri. So the first thing, obviously, writing tools, right? Being able to rewrite things that you're used to, being able to kind of word it in a better way, being able to analyze and summarize text, those kind of standard things are obviously going to be here as well. So as it shows here, obviously rewriting communication with the intelligent, right? Rewriting, summarizing key points, that kind of thing, as well as doing summaries of different notifications. So as you can see in this one, it's going to be an example of here's the priority notifications you have, and then it will, at the end of the day, like kind of summarize a group of notifications if you have a lot of them, showing what priority and time-sensitive messages you have in mail. This is using AI to kind of determine, based on subject and stuff, what urgency your emails have. We have obviously the summaries of long emails, which is what's shown here. We have things like being able to do note and phone app, capturing audio recording and transcripts automatically. This is all the things that you don't really care about, right? These are all kind of like standard writing and AI applications that we've had for a while. Obviously, image generation is another thing that no one really cares about. Generating emojis is like, whatever, right? We could do that already with Google Studio. Generating images, you could do that with literally anything, so that's not too interesting. The ability to kind of make memory modules. So this is like, hey, all the desserts I ate during the summer, and it creates a collage basically of all your images and stuff. Pretty useless because a lot of things like Google Photos already do that spontaneously. They'll do like a snapshot of like the entire life and kind of tell you about it in these photo albums. The search for photos and videos, to me, this is kind of where we start getting into the more useful aspects of it. The most useful aspect is being able to control things that I would have to normally do and take a lot of time with. For example, searching my photos, searching my email, describing my photos in email, and finding what I want has been something that I wish was on a lot of things. I have a lot of screenshots and a lot of things like that, and I wish, dang, there was a photo I took in 2020 about a specific keyboard or something, right, that I was looking at. I'd like to find that and figure out where that information is. Or as recently, T-Mobile switching carriers, I want to figure out what was that information I was looking at in terms of pricing and stuff. That's way back in my backlog. I can't find it by typing T-Mobile because the search doesn't work like that. So if I can go here and say T-Mobile like mobile plans or something, right? And it would find all the images relating to every time we took a screenshot of the mobile plan for T-Mobile. That to me is really useful because that's saving time trying to find it because it's not categorized correctly. If the AI can do that here, that's a pretty useful thing. Obviously, Magic Eraser, Android's had that for a while, but I think really here, the being able to search for photos and videos with just, text and stuff, I think will be pretty good. The whole product knowledge based on whatever phone you have seems pretty useful if you're trying to guide older people. Again, tech support and IT space, that happens a lot. So if I can just ask their iPhone, if they have a new iPhone, and I can just ask them, hey, here's how to reset the phone, or here's how to disable iMessage, like syncing between different devices. If you can just ask Siri and it's going to tell you how to do that in the correct steps, that is pretty useful from a guidance perspective, right? And then here's the other thing. So not only being able to search for photos and videos as well as emails, but the product and on-screen awareness, to me, feels like a big thing. If I can say, hey, send an image of the, T-Mobile mobile plan, all the images of that to my mother as she's discussing information, instead of having to find every single image from that and then hit send, I can just ask Siri to do it. That's pretty useful to me, right? That's going to save me time, and that's going to save me kind of figuring out all the images and stuff if they're not right there. That's effectively a way to very quickly search for what you're looking for. A friend sending you their address, adding it, all that stuff, as well as trying to identify, okay, someone sent me an email related to this internship thing, but I've gotten 100 emails related to it. I don't remember who sent it to me. So if I can just say, hey, bring up all the emails related to internships from 2023, and it can do that, that's very useful. That's something that I couldn't do necessarily with Outlook's stupid search bar, right? If I can do that with Siri and it can bring up the 4 emails that might be relevant by a person, that's a lot of time saved. That's the ability to not have to go through Outlook and find it if Siri can do that for me. And those kind of things you wouldn't necessarily know about. I have the entire thing here tracked and everything that I was talking about. You can take a picture of like a dog or a restaurant and it'll like pop up the dog and restaurant, and it'll show it to you, like, here's what breed of dog this is, here's when the restaurant has opening hours and that kind of thing. So that is pretty cool if it does work. I can just take a picture of a restaurant and have all their hours and stuff. And so those to me were the useful options, and obviously they're opening up the SDK so you can develop it with your favorite apps. That's going to obviously take time. You saw that with something called like, what are they, app clips, I believe, that Apple kind of started to work on, and then that never really got anywhere. That was 3 or 4 years ago. They basically introduced this thing called app clips, and that was a way to basically, instead of having to like download like Google Maps or something, you could download a clip of it and basically just have that API ready to go and the functions of the API without having to download a whole app. Pretty cool feature. I don't think any applications really used app clips to any significant degree, so obviously things like that are going to super depend on the implementation. And if people actually use this, and if the wider adoption is there, it would be nice to see this being used in more apps, right? There aren't just Apple. That's kind of a rundown of all the Apple Intelligence stuff that I thought was interesting. And the reason I bring this up in context of Siri is because that's kind of what Siri is going to become. And if you ignore all the other crap, there is some pretty useful things, I think, in here that make Siri above and beyond what it used to be. And obviously, in order to do that, we have to look at what it used to be. Siri was one of the first AI assistants, functionally speaking, right? But it couldn't do a lot of the things that we'd want it to, and that kind of persisted through Google Assistant and everything else until, well, I would say the AI, ChatGPT kind of model, Bing AI thing happened in 2022. These things were basically, hey, get me the weather, get me sports stats, get me movies playing, all that stuff. And it, functionally speaking, stood like this from 2012 to now. Even something like Google Assistant, you can see, had a similar problem. It was the smarter assistant, but it still couldn't do a lot of the things that you'd want it to. The only reason it was smarter was because it could connect to your smart home appliances, your Nest thermostats, your Google HomePods, your speakers, right, for music, your lights, right, if you had Philips Smart Light, and you could connect it. But that was all a manual process, right? You had to go to the Google app, you had to go to the Google Home app, you had to click new device, add Matter device or something, and then set it up there and make sure it's connected, and sometimes it would disconnect, and then you'd be able to have some control over it. With speech, a lot of the things you have to download their separate apps. So I think Philips Light's a good example, right? Where like you'd set it up, you'd click add, you click Matter, you set up the light, and you'd be able to like increase or decrease the brightness, maybe change between a couple colors. But in order to really do anything with that, you'd have to download the Philips Hue application instead. So even though you could ask Google Assistant to turn them on and off again, you couldn't really do much else. So if you wanted to change the settings for it, or do anything other than changing color and changing brightness, right? If you wanted to set up like a schedule for when it goes on and off, you can't do that through the assistant, you have to go through the app. So there was a lot of like limitations on the smart home thing, not only in terms of compatibility, but also in terms of, usability. As you can see here, you have some pretty basic controls for things like increasing brightness and turning them on and off, but the more fine-tuned details you'd hope to be able to control, you can't really do. You'd have like a Philips Smart Light, or some special blinds that could open and close when you were home or not, or a security system, or Nest cameras or something. All these are different brands inherently are going to either have their own different app or their own login process or their own account process or some kind of thing that makes them complicated to use. And so while the idea of having your cameras, your lights, your Wi-Fi, and everything in one place, it really didn't end up working out that way because the connection between everything was pretty rough. And that's why a lot of people kind of abandoned the smart home sort of situation, is because you'd get things like this camera, and the cameras would work pretty well, but then they disconnect. Oh, my lighting isn't working anymore. Oh, I changed Wi-Fi, for example. So now not only does my Google Home that controls all my smart stuff need to factory reset in order to change your Wi-Fi, but that means all your devices have to reconnect to the new device, and it's just like a pain, right? Maybe that's something that I've only had to experience because we change Wi-Fis not super frequently, but every couple of years or whatever, we'll change Wi-Fis and get either a better deal or better coverage or something, right? And so every time you do that, you have to set the home up again, right? You have to factory reset it because you can't, for some reason, change the Wi-Fi on the device once it's set up. So when you factory reset, all of a sudden all your smart home stuff has to connect again, and you have to connect it through the Matter and everything, and so you just get a problem. Small tangent to say, the main advantage of the Google stuff was this smart home integration that never really got off the ground because of the problems we just talked about. So when you have a Google Assistant that is useful only in the use cases of someone willing to go through all those processes, and then you have Siri here that can't do any of that, right? Even with HomeKit, which is Apple's version of a smart home thing, that only really got integrated with a couple of products, and most things didn't really support it, and it wasn't as widely adopted. Its obviously ability with HomeKit was, hey, let's make it simpler. Let's not have all these different devices and things. Let's just make everything work, which obviously limited your control. If your things did work with HomeKit, from what I've seen and experienced, it worked it worked better than whatever Google was doing, but it never really got that adoption. We have Siri, and you can see the Siri here, and you can see where it was, and this pretty much stayed the same until obviously the large language models started to get up. That's where you can now switch Google Assistant for the Gemini model, right? Or the Google Assistant, and Gemini is obviously going to be able to do a bunch of text crap and all that. Google Assistant, the Gemini part of it, was really that first foray into, can we use your information and the context around what you're doing to create stuff. Copilot, when it first was revealed, also had that. Turns out both Gemini and Copilot don't do that even a little bit, and were a major disappointment because of that. Both Gemini and especially Copilot, when you had those Microsoft events, talked about the ability to use your Google account and information, and Microsoft Copilot using that information, right? Being able to make PowerPoints and the integration between that, and be able to use like a Word doc you had made and convert it to a PowerPoint. Like there was this ability to basically say, hey, create this PowerPoint based on this outline from a Word doc located here, and it'd be able to create that. And that's everything they had on the demo. That never happened, like not even a little bit. And so what you end up having is this really disjointed thing when everyone's saying that, oh, look at this, it can use this. You can use an Excel sheet and take the data from the Excel sheet and put it into a table in a Word doc and all this. It was like, oh, wow. And that never came to be. Same thing with Gemini. And you can actually see this in you can actually see this in the video I made comparing all of them. Gemini told me, hey, we're going to make a Google Slides based on, this thing I wanted for some project. I was like, hey, can you make a Google Slides based on the history of, China in the 1500s or whatever? It was like, yep, no, it'll be ready in a couple hours. And obviously nothing happened. Selling feature of something like Gemini or Copilot was that ability. And so now here comes Apple trying to do that exact same thing. But this time, maybe it could work. We don't obviously know. Hopefully they're not lying a third time. But generally speaking, because everything's on the phone and local and through an app, instead of, through the internet or whatever, that it should be able to do that. It should be able to maybe write an email or find your images or send images on your behalf to a person. If it can do that, it's already ahead of what Gemini and the other ones were trying to do. And so I think if Siri can get to that point where it is doing things, and inherently Google Assistant can't because of just the variety of Android devices out there, and Copilot hasn't yet, whether it has that ability to or not, that's going to be something that I think people are going to be interested in, and it's also something I feel like people are really going to enjoy and like and prefer once you show it to them versus these other options. Now that's obviously a big caveat. Someone like me has to go in and show them of all these things they can do and all this technology, and then write it down for them, because unless you have it in writing to some capacity of, all these different things, you are going to completely forget. You're just gonna forget. You're gonna forget that I can do things on your behalf. You're just gonna remember, oh, it does all the, image generation stuff. You're not gonna remember, oh, you can actually, ask it to make a collage for you, or ask it to summarize your notifications for you, or step-by-step guidance, right? That's a big one. How do I reset my iPhone? How do I restart, and how do I update the software, right? How do I disconnect my Apple ID or something? If it can do that, instead of having to type it into Google and figure out which one's relevant and which one isn't old, because for some reason Google shows you the old version, which is completely useless. If it can do that, that's a real big benefit. But you have to remind people that it's a benefit. You have to write it down and say, hey, remember, if you need help on anything, try asking Siri and it might be able to do it for you, right? You have to go through that process, because Apple doesn't really demonstrate that. There used to be a time, I think, at one point where it would give you a little tutorial once a major redesign of the App Store, for example, happened. There was a little tutorial saying, hey, here's where we moved apps, here's where we moved search, right? They stopped doing that even when major changes happened. So people just kind of had to learn by osmosis of other people and word of mouth of what's changed. I just have to be the one to now go in and talk to them about all these new things that happened. And that's actually secure, right? Because they're like, oh, I heard about the big leak or whatever that happened and all the data's everywhere, right? You gotta talk to them and say, yep, it's secure. It's got all these features. Some of them might be useful to you. Here, let me show you, right? So I think if we can get to that point, it's going to be great. It's obviously more work for people like me to have to do that, but I think overall it's a net good if it's actually, and this can actually be what it is. So I think once that's out and once people have that in their hands, I think it is going to be pretty useful. But right now, as it stands, on top of other people that maybe, iPhone 14s or anything before the 15 that won't be able to experience this, for those people, it's not really worth using something like Siri at the moment. So yeah, hopefully that I explained that well and kind of talked through that. If you want to see more on the channel, there will be a video up next week. As always, I try to do weekly videos here on the second channel, my gaming channel. There's also bi-weekly videos on whatever gaming content there. Got a couple series I'm running. You can check that channel for that. So if you're interested in either of that, subscribe, and I'll see everyone next week.